The fluorescent lights above the hospital corridor hummed faintly as Isabella Hartfield leaned against the wall outside the emergency ward. Her scrubs clung to her body, wrinkled from a 16-hour shift. She rubbed the bridge of her nose, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. At just 25, she was already carrying the weight of the world. A medical intern at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, Isabella's days were a blur of charting patient records, rushing between wards, and running errands for attending physicians. Nights were even worse. Sometimes she had to choose between eating dinner and catching 2 hours of sleep before the next shift. But exhaustion wasn't her only burden. Bills piled high on her kitchen table. Rent was overdue. The loan companies had stopped calling and started threatening letters. Her younger brother, Jason, still in college, depended on her to send whatever she could spare for tuition. And her late father's medical debts hung over her like a storm cloud that refused to pass. She thought she had learned to live with the crushing pressure until the night everything changed. It began during her lunch break, if you could call 5 stolen minutes with a vending machine sandwich lunch. She sat alone in the hospital cafeteria when a man in a perfectly tailored navy suit entered. His presence drew eyes instantly. Silver hair swept back, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, posture straight as though authority itself belonged to him. Andrew Harrington. His reputation preceded him. At 68, he was a retired art collector and philanthropist, the kind of man whose name was whispered in galleries, museums, and charity banquets. Old Chicago money, too much money for anyone to truly calculate. He had donated a wing to the hospital itself, so Isabella recognized him from the gilded portrait that hung in the lobby. She never imagined he would know her name. Yet when he walked directly to her table, she almost choked on her sandwich. "Miss Hartfield." His voice was smooth, deliberate, cultured. She blinked, then nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. May I sit?" He didn't wait for her response before lowering himself into the chair across from her. The cafeteria buzz quieted, eyes following their table, whispers beginning. Isabella's stomach tightened. Andrew studied her, his gaze unsettling but not cruel. "I've been watching you." The word sent a chill crawling up her spine. "Your diligence. Your sacrifice. The way you carry burdens heavier than most at your age. Admirable." He folded his hands over the polished wood of his cane. "But it also worries me. You're drowning in obligations, and no one is throwing you a rope." Her throat tightened. "With respect, sir, why are you telling me this?" He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Because I am prepared to offer you a solution. A way out of your struggles. A future you never dared imagine." She stared at him, heart thudding. "What kind of solution?" Andrew Harrington's lips curled into a smile, measured, almost rehearsed. "Marry me." The world stopped. For a moment, Isabella thought she had misheard. "Excuse me?" "Marry me," he repeated calmly, as though proposing business rather than matrimony. "It will not be a union of passion or sentiment. Think of it as a contract. You, in return for your companionship and loyalty, will receive financial security. Your debts cleared. Your brother's education funded. A future free of struggle." Her mind reeled. It was absurd. Insane. He was more than twice her age, a man she barely knew beyond reputation. "You can't be serious." "I have never been more serious." "Why me?" she whispered, pulse racing. His eyes softened with something unreadable. "Because you remind me of someone. And because I believe fate chooses its moments carefully." Isabella's instincts screamed that this was wrong. Dangerous. But another voice, quieter, desperate, rose within her. Her brother's future. Her father's debts. Her own exhaustion from fighting battles she could never win. "I don't understand," she said. "Why not someone from your world? Someone closer to your age?" Andrew chuckled faintly. "Because in my world, loyalty is rare. And I don't need a wife who understands art auctions or gala speeches. I need someone who understands sacrifice. The cafeteria clock ticked loudly. Isabella's palms grew damp. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but her laughter stuck in her throat. She wanted to refuse, but the word no refused to leave her lips. Take your time, Andrew said, rising from his chair. He placed a crisp white envelope on the table. Inside, you'll find the details of what I offer. My estate, my terms. Consider it carefully. But understand, opportunities like this are not extended twice. With that, he walked away, leaving whispers in his wake and Isabella staring at the envelope as though it might explode. That night, back in her small apartment, Isabella tore open the envelope. It contained a handwritten letter, formal and deliberate, outlining what Andrew had promised. Immediate settlement of all her debts. A trust fund for her brother's education. Full access to Harrington Estate, with staff and resources. A binding marriage contract. At the bottom, his signature. Beneath it, a line waiting for hers. Isabella dropped the letter onto the table, heart pounding. It was a devil's bargain, dressed in silk and silver. To accept would mean safety, but also surrender. To refuse would mean clinging to a life that was slowly killing her. Sleep refused to come. She stared at the ceiling, imagining Jason's smile if she told him his tuition was paid. Imagining freedom from the collectors, the landlords, the endless second jobs. By dawn, the decision pressed against her chest like a stone. She met Andrew the next evening at a quiet corner table in an upscale restaurant he owned. Candles flickered, shadows danced, and the silence between them felt heavy. You've considered, he said. Not a question. Isabella's voice trembled. Yes. And your answer? Her eyes burned, her soul screaming at her, but her lips betrayed her heart. I'll do it. Andrew's smile was faint, victorious. Wise choice, Isabella. You won't regret it. But as she signed her name across the contract, her hand shook. Deep inside, a whisper warned her, you already do. If you're captivated by this story, hit subscribe and never miss a story. The cab wound its way through the northern edge of Chicago, leaving behind the familiar noise of the city and cutting toward the quiet luxury of Lake Forest. Isabella Hartfield pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching as rows of mansions appeared through the mist like sentinels guarding secrets. When the cab finally stopped at the Harrington Estate, her stomach clenched. The mansion loomed like a fortress from another century, stone walls draped in ivy, windows arched like watchful eyes, and iron gates that groaned as they opened. Isabella stepped out, her small suitcase clutched in hand. The house didn't look like a home. It looked like a warning. Andrew Harrington, her new husband of less than a week, stood at the door, tall and elegant in a tailored gray suit. His silver hair caught the last threads of evening light, and his smile was polite but hollow. Welcome home, Isabella, he said, offering his arm as though this were a scene from an old play. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and lavender polish, as if the house had been staged rather than lived in. Chandeliers glittered above, their crystals catching firelight from a massive hearth. Every detail was perfect, too perfect, Isabella thought, like the set of a film hiding the chaos behind the curtain. A small line of staff greeted her with stiff smiles and lowered eyes, a butler with skin like parchment, a housekeeper who smelled faintly of camphor, and two younger maids who avoided her gaze altogether. Mrs. Harrington, they murmured. The title made her flinch. That night, Andrew showed her to a lavish bedroom at the far end of a long, echoing corridor. The four-poster bed was draped in silk, portraits of stern-faced Harrington ancestors lined the walls. Their painted eyes followed her with quiet judgment. I trust you'll be comfortable here, Andrew said. Of course, Isabella whispered, though her voice betrayed uncertainty. But as soon as he closed the door, she noticed something strange, a small brass key left on the vanity. No note. No explanation. She picked it up, cold metal pressing into her palm, and slipped it into her pocket. Days bled into one another. Andrew was often absent, locked in his study or gone into the city for business. Isabella tried to settle into her new life: tea in the morning, long solitary walks around the estate gardens, dinners taken in silence at a long mahogany table. But the unease only deepened. The staff never spoke freely. She caught them exchanging glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Once, when she asked the younger maid, Clara, if she could open a certain door in the west wing, the girl paled and stammered. "Best not, ma'am. Some doors here aren't meant to be opened." Isabella pressed, but Clara shook her head, eyes darting to the shadows as if afraid of being overheard. One evening, unable to resist, Isabella wandered the west wing alone. The corridor was darker here, the air colder. She tried the door Clara had warned her about. Locked. She pressed her ear against it and thought she heard, what? A faint rustling. A whisper. She stepped back quickly, heart hammering. As she turned, her eyes landed on a portrait at the end of the hall. It was of a woman, painted in rich oil tones. She looked shockingly like Isabella, same brown eyes, same sharp chin. But the brass plaque beneath read, Margaret Harrington, 1894 to 1921. Isabella's skin prickled. Who was this woman who mirrored her so closely? That night at dinner, Isabella dared to ask. Andrew, who was Margaret Harrington? He paused with his wineglass halfway to his lips. For a heartbeat, something dark flickered across his face. Then he smiled thinly. She was family. That portrait is very old. I'm surprised you noticed. She looks like me, Isabella pressed. Yes, Andrew said softly, almost to himself. She does. Then he changed the subject. Unable to sleep, Isabella took the brass key from her pocket and studied it under a lamplight. Small. Old-fashioned. Too delicate for any of the heavy doors she had seen in the mansion. She turned it over in her hand until exhaustion claimed her. At dawn, a sound woke her, a faint scratching outside her door. She opened it quickly but found no one. Only a folded piece of paper on the floor. Her heart raced as she picked it up. The note was hurried, written in shaky ink. Trust no one. Meet me by the garden fountain tonight. See. Isabella's breath caught. See. Clara. She tucked the note into her nightgown and returned to bed, pulse thrumming like a drum. When night fell, Isabella slipped quietly through the halls, careful not to wake the sleeping house. The moon cast the gardens in silver. By the fountain, Clara waited, wringing her hands. Mrs. Harrington, Clara whispered urgently. You must be careful. Mr. Harrington, he isn't what he seems. What do you mean? Isabella pressed. Clara glanced around nervously. There are rooms you mustn't open. Things you mustn't ask. The last woman who did, she never left this house. Isabella's throat went dry. The last woman? Do you mean Margaret? But Clara froze, eyes wide with terror, as a shadow passed across the garden path. Andrew Harrington's tall frame emerged from the darkness, his gaze fixed on them. What is this? His voice was low, dangerous. Isabella's blood turned cold. The next morning, Clara was gone. The housekeeper told Isabella that Clara had returned to her family. But when Isabella asked where, no one would answer. Her suspicions grew heavier by the hour. And then, fate intervened. Wandering through the library one rainy afternoon, Isabella noticed a loose panel near the hearth. She pried it open, heart pounding, and there, hidden in the shadows, was a small iron safe. She pulled the brass key from her pocket, almost trembling. It slid in perfectly. With a soft click, the safe opened. Inside, wrapped in yellowed parchment, was a bundle of letters. Isabella's hands shook as she pulled them free, eyes skimming over words that made her chest tighten. The Heartfield name must pay. They will suffer as we once suffered. Her name. Her family. Before she could read further, a floorboard creaked behind her. Her breath caught. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think happened next? She turned, and found out it was an object that fell. As she continued in her quest, she discovered a diary. The diary trembled in Isabella's hands, its cracked leather cover whispering of years it had spent hidden away. The ink on its pages had faded, but the words were sharp enough to slice through her breath. Each entry was venom-laced with grief. The Heartfields took everything. My father was ruined. Our land was stolen. Our name dragged through mud. I will not forget. I will not forgive. Isabella's pulse quickened. This wasn't just some obscure family grievance, it was Andrew's handwriting. She flipped frantically through more pages, her eyes catching phrases that chilled her blood. One day, I'll make them see. The daughter will pay for the father's sins. She will walk willingly into my trap. The diary slipped from her grip, thudding against the wooden floorboards. For a moment, the entire mansion seemed to exhale, the walls groaning, the chandelier above swaying ever so slightly. Looking for something? The voice behind her was velvet wrapped around steel. Isabella spun around. Andrew Harrington stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow into the room. His eyes, cold yet gleaming with triumph, darted to the diary at her feet. You shouldn't be in here, he said softly, stepping closer. That room is private. Isabella's throat tightened. This is madness. You wrote all of this? Andrew crouched down, picking up the diary like one would cradle a child. He dusted its cover gently before straightening to his full height. Every word, he confessed, almost with pride. It's the truth no one else dared to preserve. Your father destroyed my family, Isabella. Everything you've ever had, the comfort, the wealth, the privilege, was bought with my father's blood. Her heart pounded. My father was many things, but he was no thief. You can't punish me for what happened decades ago. Andrew's smile was thin, cruel. Oh, but I already am. You came here willingly. You trusted me. And soon, you'll understand the weight of a legacy you were too blind to see. He moved past her, setting the diary back on the dusty desk as though sealing away his confession. When he turned again, his mask of charm had returned, though it cracked faintly at the edges. Dinner will be served shortly. Don't be late. And just like that, he was gone. That evening, Isabella sat at the grand dining table under the oppressive glow of crystal chandeliers. Every bite of food tasted bitter, every glance from Andrew felt like a silent accusation. The staff moved like shadows, their expressions unreadable. Midway through the meal, one of the maids brushed past Isabella, slipping a folded note into her lap without breaking stride. Isabella concealed it under the table, her hands trembling as she opened it. You're not safe here. Midnight. Back garden. Trust no one. Her breath caught. Who could she trust? And what did they know? The hours crawled by until the mansion fell silent. Isabella slipped from her room, clutching the note, her bare feet whispering against the cold marble floor. She pushed open the glass doors to the back garden, where moonlight spilled across the roses like silver dust. A figure emerged from the hedges, the butler, Mr. Alden. His face was lined with age, but his eyes burned with urgency. Miss Heartfield, he whispered, bowing slightly. I served the Harringtons long before Andrew. I know his pain, but I also know his madness. He blames your father for things that were not his doing. He's been planning this. This? Isabella's voice cracked. Alden pressed something into her hand, a set of rusted keys. These open the basement. You must see what's inside. Only then will you understand what you're dealing with. Before she could respond, a sharp clap echoed through the garden. Both froze. Andrew stepped into the moonlight, slow applause cutting the night. His gaze flicked from Alden to Isabella, then to the keys in her hand. "Betrayal," he said coolly, his smile curdling. "From my own staff. I should have known." Alden stepped forward, shielding Isabella. "Enough, Andrew. This vendetta will destroy you." Andrew's face hardened, the mask fully gone now. "Then let it." The next morning, Isabella woke in her room, disoriented. Had the confrontation been a dream? But the keys lay heavy in her palm, proof that it wasn't. She tucked them into her dress pocket and waited until the mansion fell into its sluggish morning rhythm. Slipping past the staff, she descended the narrow staircase to the basement. The air grew colder, damper, carrying the weight of secrets unspoken. She unlocked the heavy iron door, hinges groaning in protest. Inside, rows of dusty boxes lined the walls. Isabella rifled through them, her heart hammering, until she pulled out old newspapers, photographs, and letters. The truth spilled out in fragments. Her father had indeed gone into business with Andrew's father. There had been scandal, yes, debts unpaid, promises broken. But Andrew's father had gambled away much of his fortune, forging documents that dragged the Hartfields into ruin with him. Her father hadn't stolen. He had been manipulated, and both families had paid the price. And Andrew. Andrew had twisted the truth, choosing revenge over reason. A floorboard creaked behind her. Isabella turned. Andrew stood at the doorway, his face pale, eyes blazing. "So. You found it." His voice was broken now, stripped of grandeur. "All my life. I built myself on the belief that your father was the villain. That my hatred was righteous. And now," he laughed bitterly. "Now I'm nothing but a fool." Isabella held his gaze. "You don't have to be. Hatred doesn't have to be the end of you." But Andrew shook his head. "It's too late." He took a step back, the shadows swallowing him. "You've already betrayed me, Isabella. And betrayal demands consequence." The door slammed shut. The iron lock clicked from the outside, plunging Isabella into darkness. Her breath came fast, shallow, panic clawing at her chest. She hammered against the door, shouting, but the stone walls swallowed her voice. The air was thick, suffocating. Somewhere above, she thought she heard footsteps fading away. And then, silence. Alone in the darkness, Isabella pressed her back to the cold wall. Her father's ghost weighed heavy on her shoulders, but so did her own determination. She whispered to herself, almost as a vow. "I will not let this destroy me. I will not become what he wants me to be." Her fingers brushed against the keys again. One had not yet been tried. She fumbled in the dark, fitting it into the inner lock. With a groan, the mechanism shifted. The door creaked open just enough for a sliver of light to spill through. But before she could push it wider, a voice echoed in the corridor. Andrew's voice, ragged and furious. "You can't run from me, Isabella. Not now. Not ever." The battle lines had been drawn. And the showdown was coming. Like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable emotional, compelling and soul-touching stories. The moment Andrew Harrington's voice echoed through the corridor, Isabella's pulse quickened. She clutched the leather journal tighter, every page a weapon of truth, every word a dagger aimed at her already fragile world. He emerged from the shadows of the study, his presence commanding, his cane tapping against the polished floor. His silver hair caught the light, but it was his eyes, cold, sharp, unforgiving, that rooted her to the spot. "So," he drawled, his tone both mocking and sorrowful. "You've finally uncovered the past I worked so hard to bury." Isabella steadied her breath. "You ruined my family. You made me a pawn in your revenge." Andrew's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. Your father stole years of my life. My fortune. My reputation. Did you really think I'd let that go unpunished? She felt her knees tremble, but anger braced her spine. So you trapped me here. Married me just to watch me suffer. Andrew's expression flickered, an odd mixture of fury and regret. You were never meant to suffer. You were meant to learn. To feel the weight of betrayal, the sting of loss, just as I did. The words hung heavy between them, twisting like a blade. Isabella saw the broken man beneath the polished exterior, a man consumed by ghosts. But his pain did not excuse his cruelty. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Thomas, the loyal butler who had quietly shadowed her since her arrival, rushed in, his voice trembling but resolute. Sir, enough. She deserves to live free of your vendetta. Andrew's eyes blazed. Stay out of this, Thomas. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, Thomas countered. I watched you rot from the inside, clinging to bitterness. This isn't justice, it's madness. The room thickened with tension. Isabella's grip tightened on the journal. If you don't stop, I'll go to the police. These records, your confessions, your secrets, they'll destroy you. Andrew froze, his cane trembling in his hand. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. But then he smiled, a hollow, weary smile. Do you think they would care for an old man's sins? Or yours, Isabella, for being complicit? Before the weight of his words could crush her, headlights swept across the window. Tires screeched against gravel. The sharp sound of car doors slamming broke the suffocating silence. Moments later, Detective Elena Ruiz entered with 3 officers. Isabella's classmate, Marcus, who she had secretly confided in weeks earlier, stood just behind them. Relief flooded her veins. Mr. Harrington, Ruiz said firmly, her badge gleaming. We've had our eyes on you for a while. And thanks to Ms. Hartfield's courage, we now have proof. Andrew's cane struck the floor, fury boiling over. You think you know the truth? You know nothing of what was taken from me. The officers advanced, but Isabella stepped forward. Her voice trembled, yet her words cut with clarity. What was taken is gone. You can't rebuild your life by destroying mine. For the first time, Andrew faltered. His eyes softened, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of decades finally crushed him. The fire dimmed, replaced by a hollow grief. He turned toward Isabella. Do you hate me? The question pierced her heart. She wanted to scream yes, to unleash the pain he had inflicted. But instead, she whispered, no. I pity you. Tears welled in Andrew's eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. He allowed the officers to take him by the arm. As he was led from the room, his voice carried a final murmur, perhaps, that is the justice I deserved all along. The days that followed blurred together. The estate, once suffocating, felt strangely hollow without Andrew's looming presence. Isabella packed her belongings, her heart heavy but her spirit lighter than it had been in months. Thomas approached her with the journal, now closed and bound with twine. You should keep this. It's his story, but it's also yours. She took it gently. Thank you, for standing by me. He bowed his head. You gave me hope again, Miss Hartfield. Hope that even the darkest souls can choose the light. Weeks later, Isabella stood before a modest crowd at the university auditorium. The banner behind her read, the Hartfield Scholarship for Medical Hopefuls. She had sold her share of Andrew's estate, funneling the money into a fund that would support students like her, those who carried both ambition and hardship. As she spoke to the audience, her voice carried strength. This is not just a scholarship. It's a second chance, for those who dream of healing others, but need someone to believe in them. Applause filled the hall, but what filled her heart was something greater, freedom. That night, as she walked home beneath the city lights, Isabella opened the journal once more. Amid the bitterness and rage, she found fragments of Andrew's humanity, his longing for love, his desperation for meaning. She closed it gently, whispering to the night, "May you finally find peace." In the quiet of her apartment, Isabella placed the journal on a shelf and turned to her desk, where textbooks and medical notes lay scattered. She was no longer the desperate intern who accepted a deal out of fear. She was a survivor, a healer, a woman who had faced shadows and emerged into light. And as the city hummed around her, she allowed herself the smallest, bravest smile, knowing that her story was not defined by betrayal, but by the strength to choose forgiveness, and the courage to begin again. The end. Comment yes if you believe justice was served, and no if you believe that he should have been forgiven and pardoned.